Hey, fellas, this is for Bio 1. Try to limit it to about 15 minutes as we move forward, which would be the end of the presentation. So we'll just kind of see where it goes. And then if I do finish this, you guys are going to have to prep for an online discussion from an app called WebEx. I'm going to get the email link out to you, and it should go pretty well. And we'll discuss what would have happened in that lab you were going to do. So we'll have one more lecture or two, and then we'll have a discussion for the lab and then a test, okay? So Darwin needed to come together with some pieces of the puzzle for evolution. his evidence, as you know. So one of the best things that anybody could produce as evidence for evolution is a fossil. It shows changes of once living organism and how they've changed into something that lives today, right? So if we find similar features on a critter from 500 million years ago to things that exist today, then you would establish in your brain, at least to some degree, that a relationship exists between those two creatures. So all animals that have bones, you would presume are related, and they're different from animals that don't have bones, but those are still animals. So while they have some common ground, more features of similar nature make you more related to the other individuals of those same similar features. So what Darwin was able to do in using the fossil record is a comparison of creatures that lived on land a while ago. This fella here, right? And then to watch the changes in these creatures as time progressed. So you start to see a reduction in limb length and an increase in torso length, right? The legs are getting shorter here, and these legs here are less adapted for walking, and they're significantly more adapted for swimming. The skull is getting longer, and then this one's starting to have a bigger torso and web feet on its legs and shorter forelimbs, and it's starting to become more what we call fusiform or longitudinal. It's getting longer, right? Now we come over here. Isn't that great when it does that on accident? Close, please. Please close. There we go. Okay. So that leads you to a question: why a creature like this would have a limb that's it's disconnected from the entirety of the vertebral column, and the limb is also very, very short. It doesn't make a lot of sense. The only thing that evolutionary biologists come up with is the idea that it was formerly a leg, and this is a snapshot in time of this leg no longer having any real role other than the idea that it was once a leg, right? So finding a feature like this here is demonstrative of a limb like this fading away over time. So the creatures that had shorter and shorter limbs were chosen through natural selection to be better. And in finding the fossils of these creatures, we can demonstrate those changes over time. Okay? So fossils are important. The distribution, where they exist on the planet. One of Darwin's big questions was, why did he find slightly different creatures on the Galapagos Islands than he did on the mainland, right? And on different continents, why did he find similar creatures in similar environments? And the answer is that the environment provided for that. All these fellows over here, the beaver, the muskrat, capybara, and the coypu, they are similar creatures, you can see that, but they're not necessarily closely related because they live in different parts of the world. But the parts of the world that they live in are very similar. So Darwin used this as an example to say that when organisms evolve in areas that are similar on the planet, then they end up becoming, excuse me, they become similar. That's evidence for evolution. Distributed all throughout the world's geography, creatures that are similar end up looking that way because of where they live. So the environment drives this relationship. Creatures that live on different continents can look the same because the environment's doing it. Homologous structures, homo meaning the same in this case, very, very important for us to understand. I think you're starting to look at the image already, okay? See these limbs all through here, all similar to this one here, okay? So this is a bone arrangement that is carried through each of these individuals as exhibited by the color, okay? So the frog has a humerus, the radius and the ulna are in purple, the carpals are in green, and then the metacarpals and the phalanges are in red and blue. The fish had that. So the question is, why would a leaper or a swimmer of sorts, a swimming walker, a flyer, and a runner all have similar bones to these other creatures? And the reason for that is because they all receive the bones that they receive from their parents and their parents before them and so forth and so on. And it takes them to a time where, as the evolution was occurring, you start with the bones that the individual's born with, and then those that have better bones for better applications become more adapted to the task at hand. So the creatures that moved onto land that became amphibians, they developed those structures based upon the bones they were given from fishes. Birds and reptiles come from a similar branch, and these mammals over here, this is not a traditional mammal limb, but it's good for horses. Why would they have bones in the same locations if they all didn't get it from the same source and be so weirdly adapted to the forms that they've become? In other words, creatures that do certain things based upon what they were given don't do it in a way that would have been thought of. It was sort of, they began this way and had to take what they had and turn it into something else. So a bad start coming to a better conclusion, right? So where we find these relationships in homologous structures, that bird wings are more similar to birds than they are to bats. Let me pull up a bat wing here for you. And we're going to see, spelled it wrong. Anyway, you can see that there's lots of fingers in this bat, which is a mammalian characteristic, phalanges. Right? We studied that in our skeletal features. Just click on this one. This one's great. It should be in my lesson. You see that the bat is very similar to the human because we're both mammal. They have longer phalanges, right, metacarpals. Whereas the bird, there's fusion. Humerus, radius, and ulna are similar, and then you get out here to these are the phalanges, the metacarpals. They are longer than here, and then they're fused. We're supposed to have 5 metacarpals. The bat and the bird do. But the bat and the human do, but the bird does not. So you can see how it's fused together. So it's a little bit different, or it's a lot of bit different, right? Okay. So what that's trying to say, take home lesson there. 2 mammals are more similar to each other, even though one is a climber and one's a flyer, right? Bird skeletons are going to more closely resemble reptiles than they do other mammals. They're supposed to. That's where they evolved from. And bat wings are more similar to mammals like the whales, because that's how we evolved, right? Next piece is this goes back to our little presentation piece here. This is a vestigial structure. It's a structure that's fading away over time from the phenotype. So why would these salamanders have dinky legs, reduced legs, or no legs at all? It's because they're losing their legs. As the gene pool emerges with the new adaptations, they're losing them. More relationship, more evidence. Darwin says, why do all creatures that come through vertebrate lineages develop in a similar way? Well, because we got that as well from our previous generations. So chickens that are birds and turtles that are reptiles, rats that are mammals, they all look similar in similar stages of development, as a result of receiving the instructions on how to develop from similar sources. Fishes gave it to amphibians. Amphibians gave rise to reptiles and birds and mammals. So if the instruction is the same, then they're going to follow through the same process. Okay? I want you guys to also, you're going to do this activity, but I think you're going to be fully aware at this point, it's 2020, and genetics tells us that organisms that we presume to be similar, we should be able to find a similarity in genetic code. Okay? So go ahead and do this analyzing data, right? And include that as part of your homework for having observed the presentation today. When you do this one here, what I want you to do is include this information as page 1, and you can, if you want to, you can just slide this over on your screen and answer it over here. This is something we normally would have done in class. It's a really brief activity, and I'll give you a heads up. There are 40 letters across this code here. This little snip of the genome, I want you to see there's 40, and you'll need that information to answer that. Okay, you could have figured that on your own, but anyway, I'm telling you. All right. So genetics, the last piece of Darwin's piece of evidence. However, Darwin didn't produce this. We had to figure this out later, and you can see up here, Darwin had no idea of how heredity worked. He couldn't use this. We can. And just part of what you guys are going to look at, this is important as well. Look at this guy at the top. It's got a beak suited for its task, okay? So this is the bird that's going to snip away at the branches based upon its beak. Whereas you can see this one's got a little needle beak. It's better for chasing bugs through the air. And the ground finches, this one that eats bugs from plants, has more of a curved, pointy beak for feeding from the plants. And then the big Geospiza has a crushing beak for eating the seeds that end up falling to the ground. So all suited for the task that they perform. It's also, it's difficult to see evolution in real human time because in many cases it could take a very long time to occur. So Peter and Rosemary Grant were over in the Galapagos Islands for a long time. Their study was over 35 years. And it was a demonstration of the ability to see evolution in practice, okay? So if you look at this graph, I'll give you a second. What do you see in this graph? Remember, we're going to start over there at the title and then on the X and Y axis. So process that for a moment. Remember, reading the graph as beak size increases, the percentage of individuals surviving increase. So larger beaks give a greater chance at survival. So anything over 10 increases pretty rapidly in its survival rate. But even approaching 11, there's about 25% survival at 11 and beyond. It's nearly double that at 12, okay? So this is saying that over time, the bigger beaks are going to survive more and the smaller beaks are going to survive less. And this will result in larger beak sizes being more prevalent in the population. And then that process may or may not continue. Okay. They were able to see this over a 35-year study in the islands. They captured the birds. They banned them. They put a little band on their ankle. And then they track those birds when they capture them again to see who survives and who doesn't. So lots and lots of data. So there's a lot of holes in the data, but still a great deal of data pointing at survival rates in the bigger beaks. Okay. So here's the summary of Darwin's ideas, right? So differences between individuals are critical, right? And those variations are heritable. Organisms produce way more offspring than can survive, and many of them that do survive don't produce. Because there's more offspring, that means there's competition for limited amounts of resources, and every organism's advantages or disadvantages help them in this struggle for existence day in and day out. The best suited individuals produce most successfully. They pass those traits on. So the ones that are best for the environment pass on more individual offspring than those before them. Other ones die or leave fewer offspring. So the math starts to tilt in favor of those that are better. That's called natural selection. As a result of this, every organism that's alive today is a descendant with modifications from previous versions. All of this can take us back to an ancestral form which produced variations that created what we have today in this one single tree of life. And then that brings us to the timeline. We spoke of everyone on this timeline to kind of give you an idea, in the neighborhood of 100, just under 100 years, about 80 years passed from the time that Hutton was doing his research with geology all the way up to Darwin publishes. And it was significant, right? The amount of time that passed. It's a whole human lifetime. Okay. So yeah, go ahead and do this. You can end up just, if you want to delete that, that's fine. And then drag this guy around. You already did 16.3 for me, so let's do 16.4 in the same way. Don't send me Word documents. I want you to send me pictures. And you can just do a snip, or you can actually hit not function, but the print screen button, which is F11. That'll give you a clipboard image you can just paste right into the document. So, or you can use the snipping tool. Y'all know how to do that too down here, right? Cool. And there it is. Okay. The next time we meet, I'm going to try to do this live. So I should have the software that I can send you a link to log in and watch live while I share my screen. Y'all can ask questions, you can type text, and we can record that for somebody who can't be there for whatever reason. But the anticipation is that you guys are going to be there for the lesson. All right? Talk to you soon.